that we recorded for Fully Groove Recording Company. And it was Joe Jefferson, Major Harris, and another brother named Ron Hopper. He lives in...
The Blue Notes began as a group named the Charlemagnes with 6 members: Sam Sally, Roosevelt Brody, Franklin Picker, Ronald Williams, Jesse Gillis Jr., and Albert Forrest. Although their success didn't come immediately, gradually, they rose to fame, and their songs became very impactful throughout the era. However, their rise ended suddenly. What happened to them? Did they encounter any tragedy during their career? This is the heartbreaking story of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, a group that paid a heavy price just after attaining fame and success. Early career and formation of the group. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were more than just a soul-singing group. Today, they are the pioneers of a sound that defined an era. In the 1970s, the group became one of the most influential acts in R&B, with top hits including The Love I Lost, Wake Up Everybody, and If You Don't Know Me By Now. Their songs were the anthems of love and heartbreak. Although their success did not come early, their leader, Harold Melvin, was determined to do whatever it took to break into the industry. A quick skim through their release lyrics and lines, the Blue Notes were known to weave love and flowers into their songs such that the hardships of the 70s seemed like a faraway theme. It is said that Teddy's voice in the songs I Miss You and Yesterday I Had the Blues is enough to rouse just about anyone. The group pushed through in moments of intensity and attack and became successful. For all the joy the Blue Notes brought, the universe had decided to pay them back with pain, hardship, and tragedy. It began with a series of internal struggles. Then, financial disputes arose. And finally, the power struggle among the band members brought a split into the group. They started with their most well-known member, Teddy Pendergrass, the band's lead singer. He was the group's golden child and had reached the height of fame. But regardless of this, misfortune struck in ways that no one, especially Pendergrass, could have imagined. However, Teddy wasn't the only one who experienced tragic moments. His fellow bandmate Harold had also faced major challenges in his career and personal life. The rise of Harold Melvin. Harold's story is very much a part of the Blue Notes. His journey with the group began long before the band achieved chart-topping success in the 70s. Like many other soul groups, their journey wasn't without struggles and persistence. The group reinvented themselves using their experiences and their failures. The band was formed in the early 50s by Harold Melvin, a talented singer, songwriter, and visionary who believed in blending doo-wop harmonies with rhythm and blues. The group's name came after several changes. They were formerly known as the Charlemagnes when they first started. Their career was filled with ups and downs, typical to every upcoming act. They played small ventures, struggled for recognition, and frequently replaced members. But despite their undeniable talent throughout the 1950s and 60s, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes remained underground. They were barely heard of or seen, and when they managed to release songs, none of them gained significant attention, and the group seemed like they were not making any progress compared to other rising acts and groups of the time. However, Harold was not one to give up on his beliefs easily. He knew he had great talent, and this knowledge often drove him to look for ways to improve the group's sound and appeal. One of the key moments where Harold's contributions were seen was in the late 1960s when he took in a young and powerful vocalist who turned out to be Teddy Pendergrass. Although Teddy was originally a drummer, he had a passionate and intense voice. Melvin was quick to recognize this talent and quickly made a move to change the group's direction. This decision was a turning point for the group in the early 70s. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes finally caught the attention of producer Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, the legendary masterminds behind Philadelphia International Records. The label played a pivotal role in shaping what would eventually be recognized as Philly soul, a genre characterized by its rich tapestry interweaving elements of soul, funk, and R&B. It captured the essence of the music scene emerging from Philadelphia in the late 1960s and early 1970s. This movement was not just about rhythm and melodies, but creating songs with profound emotional depth and polished production that resonated with audiences. When music producers Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff discovered the group, their careers marked a turning point. They had been searching for distinctive voices and compelling talents to elevate their production capabilities. With this group, they saw immense potential to create high-quality material that could stand the test of time. Their partnership blossomed, offering the band a platform to showcase their artistic abilities. In 1972, the group unveiled their album, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, a project demonstrating their evolution as musicians. The recording sessions were charged with creativity and collaboration, reflecting individual growth and a newfound energy within the band. Each member brought their unique strengths to the table, and this collective union resulted in a fresh and deeply resonant sound. One of the standout tracks from this album was If You Don't Know Me By Now. This song highlighted the group's vocal prowess and encapsulated the emotional struggles of love and longing, a theme relatable to many. The song's heartfelt lyrics and melodious arrangement struck a chord with listeners, marking it their first significant success. It eventually became a timeless classic, further solidifying its place in the music world and the legacy of Philly soul. The album, infused with authenticity and soulful expression, helped lay the groundwork for the genre and influence countless artists in the years to come. Noted for its heartbreaking lyrics and Teddy Pendergrass's emotional delivery, the song reached #1 on the R&B charts and #3 on the Billboard Hot 100. If You Don't Know Me By Now wasn't just a hit song, it became their pivotal moment and the foundation of the Philly soul sound. Following this success, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes quickly became one of the premier acts on Philadelphia International Records. Their streak of hit songs began. Wake Up Everybody became an anthem that wasn't just a hit by melody, but also a song that talked about their generation's political and racial issues. Harold Melvin stood out as the group's ambitious leader, but in reality, Teddy Pendergast was the group's star commercially. His electrifying voice gave him a commanding stage presence that could not be tainted. This apparent demarcation laid the groundwork for their internal conflict. By the mid-70s, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes had established their place in music history. They finally overcame years of stagnancy and obscurity and were now at the top of the most celebrated soul groups. But unfortunately, as the spotlight grew brighter, so did the tensions behind the scenes. The beginning of internal conflict and power struggle. After about 20 years of obscurity, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes finally reached a height of global success. Then, tensions within the group began to grow. Their songs were topping charts, selling in millions, and bringing them money and fame. Yet, behind the stage, all was not well. The group's leader, Harold, was a major part of the reason for these conflicts, as the other members often found his management and leadership style uncomfortable. However, being the group's founder, Melvin had always seen himself as the reason behind the group's success, so he acted and made certain decisions solely by himself. He controlled the group's business decisions, from bookings to financial arrangements. While his leadership helped the group rise to fame, his members felt that his need to operate the group according to his direction was limiting them. The group's star, Teddy Pendergrass, began to feel that Melvin's control extended too far, especially regarding money and credit. One of the biggest frustrations they faced as a group was the financial arrangement of the group. Despite being the lead singer behind their major hits, Teddy was reportedly paid less than he felt he deserved. Many fans assumed he was the group's true leader because his voice stood out as the group's signature sound. However, in reality, Teddy only controlled the microphone and his voice. Harold Melvin controlled the business, and most financial rewards flowed in and out only if he wanted them to. Teddy also expressed frustration when his name was not included in the group's official title, though his voice was a major factor behind their success. The tension between Melvin and Pendergrass slowly built up just as the group's name gathered more followers. As talented as he was, Pendergast was also ambitious. He realized he could potentially have a more lucrative and fulfilling career as a solo artist rather than remaining under Melvin's control. He wanted more control over financial rewards, a greater number of fans for himself, and of course, a reinvention and an introduction of his solo self. In 1976, the breaking point came. After years of accumulated disputes and power struggles, Teddy Pendergrass left. His departure struck the group. It was one thing that the group's sound would never remain the same, but it was different when that same voice would echo in Teddy's solo career. Even though Harold Melvin tried to become the new lead singer, it was never quite the same. As the group struggled to stand back on their feet, Pendergrass, on the other hand, was fast rising to stardom. His debut solo album came in 1977. I Don't Love You Anymore and The Whole Town's Laughing at Me received great attention on this album. Over the next few years, he became one of the biggest R&B stars of the late 1970s and early 1980s. His unique voice continued to stand out, pushing his career to greater heights. Without him, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes continued to struggle. Their popularity slowly fell, and they could never regain their success status as they did in the early 70s. Melvin brought vocalists David Ebo and Gil Saunders to salvage the situation, but it didn't help. They were fading into the ground. Teddy's decision to leave began the group's long, slow decline. They had once been a dominant force in soul music, but now the only thing left of them were old sounds from a member who was no longer a part of the group. They continued performing and releasing new songs, but none gained significant attention. They had gone back to how it used to be before Teddy Pendergrass. What should have been a lasting partnership ended in a bitter split. The accumulation of disputes, creative clashes, and personal ambitions had shattered what used to be one of the greatest soul groups of the time. As years passed, Melvin and Pendergrass faced even greater struggles, some far more devastating than the conflicts they'd experienced in the industry. The rise, fall, and tragedies of Pendergrass. Leaving the Blue Notes in 1976 marked Teddy's end in the band and the beginning of his solo career. He soared to stardom quickly. His talent and undeniable charisma made him one of the biggest R&B singers. After his debut album, Teddy Pendergrass, released in 1977, his new albums, Life is a Song Worth Singing, 1978, Teddy, 1979, and TP, 1980, provided Gums with iconic songs that kept his winning streak shining non-stop. In an interview for a documentary, the director, Olivia Lichtenstein, once mentioned that a guy said, "Teddy Pendergrass was an early form of Viagra. Pendergrass was as sexy as he was sexual, and by all means he gave the women all the love he could muster." In response, they all went crazy. They would rush to the stage and throw their underwear at him when he performed. Sometimes they disguised themselves as maids to get into his hotel room. Seeing this sort of obsession, his manager Gordon suggested that Pendergrass put on a ladies-only concert, which worked. Women would suck on chocolate lollies while Pendergrass performed his sensual songs. James Carter, a drummer in his band, once said in an interview that even Pendergrass didn't understand the effect he had on women. He would come out in a worn-out t-shirt, and they would go crazy. Pendergrass oozed a sensual appeal that was difficult to keep in check at the peak of his career, especially when he turned on his husky, passionate voice. As a solo artist, he was often called the Black Elvis. He had 4 platinum albums in a row. His success came with all the trappings, including a fleet of luxurious cars and a stable of horses. He even had his own jeans label, and this was him just at the beginning of his solo career. In addition to his major success, he had established himself as an intimacy symbol in the R&B world. He was known for his ladies-only concerts, where women would swoon as he performed his sensual ballads in silk draping robes. He was often compared to Marvin Gaye, but his gospel-infused vocals set him apart. By the early 1980s, he had become one of the world's most successful black male artists. He sold out stadiums and dominated charts. However, just as he was reaching his peak, his life took a devastating turn. The accident in 1982 and its controversy. On March 18, 1982, Teddy Pendergrass's life took a tragic turn. While driving his Rolls-Royce in Philadelphia, he crashed into a guardrail and 2 trees. The accident shocked the music industry and devastated his fans. But no one was more devastated than Teddy himself. The accident had paralyzed him from the chest down. It wasn't just an unexpected twist. It was a cruel fate for a man just at the peak of his career. When the accident happened, he was only 31 years old. Conspiracy theories came from different angles. For a black man to be as successful as Pendergrass, it wasn't just the ladies who wanted him. In 1976, his first manager, who was a woman by the name of Taz Lang, was shot dead in front of her door. Taz Lang's murder remains a mystery, one of the unsolved cases of the police at the time. It was unclear who wanted Lang dead. Was it the local criminals? Did they resent her control over Pendergrass? After all, she wasn't just a manager, she was his girlfriend too. But then again, there was more than one controversy surrounding Pendergrass's car accident. Before it happened in 1982, Pendergrass friends said he had found the brake cables cut on some of his other cars. Pendergrass liked to drive fast cars, which made him choose the Rolls-Royce. But the car had some issues too. After the accident, the car company compensated him. The accident conspiracy theories did not end there. At the time, Pendergrass and the police in Philadelphia were not on good terms. At the time of the accident, he sued the police department for harassing him and demanded $500,000 as a settlement. At the crash scene, there were reports that Pendergrass was seen begging Tenica Watson not to leave him alone. "Don't let them hurt me," he cried. For a car accident that broke Pendergrass's neck and left him paralyzed, his fans questioned how Tenica could have left the crash relatively unharmed. Teddy lost his mobility. He lost his career just as fast. The life he built for himself was quickly snapped from him. Teddy admitted that the months following the accident were the darkest days of his life. Not expecting to lose his fame as quickly as he did, Teddy began to suffer severe depression. He was yet to come to terms with his paralysis. He had lost the physical confidence that made him a star. However, despite the unimaginable twist, Teddy's ambition persisted. 2 years after his accident, he returned to the music scene in 1984. Despite all his love for women and the women's love for him, Pendergrass was married to one woman, Karen. He had 3 children by 2 women, but his extraordinary philanthropic life remained. One time, Pendergrass extended his extraordinary philandering to his rival's wife, whom he was always compared to. Janice Gay mentioned in her memoir that she was out with Pendergrass on a date one night, snorting cocaine and talking while Marvin stood outside the whole time. On the issue of substance abuse, Shep Gordon shared how he became Teddy's manager. "If you're still standing at the end of it, you don't need me," he said. "If I'm still standing, you need me." He was talking about an all-out substance challenge. After a few days, Pendergrass collapsed. Gordon became his manager for the rest of his life. By this time, Pendergrass's sexually active life had become a part of his musical career. In an interview, Teddy mentioned his type of woman. "I'm not about to have any lady who's going to run me down and say I've got to report to her where I'm at. She has to realize that I'm a traveling entertainer, and if it's rough on her, that's the end." Later, during the documentary about his life, the director could not help but ask Karen, his wife, how she had lived with all of that. She replied, "If you were going to be with a man like Teddy, that was part of the deal." Karen stayed married to Pendergrass even after his accident. Grappled with depression and suicidal thoughts, Karen stayed by his side, helping him recuperate and get therapy and all that was necessary. In 1985, Pendergrass was introduced as a guest artist in a Live Aid show by Ashford and Simpson. He was greeted with deafening applause as he rolled onto the stage in a wheelchair. Being a man who had led such an overly sexual life, when Pendergrass appeared again on stage, his songs had a new momentum. He was more compassionate, more platonic. Tears flooded his face, and the wheelchair beneath was an inspiration and a sign of his redeemed life. Pendergrass recorded more albums in no time and became the first wheelchair user to have mainstream songs. Despite being in a wheelchair, the women returned, and Teddy welcomed them as always. Then, in 2002, Karen tendered a divorce. When asked why she divorced him even after being stuck by him all that time, Karen simply replied that she couldn't take the woman anymore. He returned with an album called Love Language, which featured the hit single Hold Me and a duet with Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was unknown at the time, so the duet marked his major appearance in the music industry. Sitting in a wheelchair, it wasn't easy for Teddy's performances to remain the same. However, he still recorded a few successful hits because his voice remained powerful, with that signature intensity. In his 1991 album, Truly Blessed, he added the uplifting track It Should Have Been You, which inspired millions. However, his health didn't improve. It got worse, deteriorating badly over the years. The trials of Harold Melvin and the tragic ends of other members. Teddy Pendergrass remained the only superstar of the Blue Notes band, but wasn't the only one with controversies and bad decisions. In 1983, Melvin was caught up in serious legal trouble. Arrested in Atlantic City on substance charges, he was taken alongside several other band members. He was charged with possession of cocaine and carrying an unlicensed handgun. Substance-related troubles were a rave in the 80s, particularly in Hollywood. Not much of it is documented, but we all know many of our legends back then struggled with addiction that contributed to their maniacal behaviors on and off screen. Unlike many other high-profile R&B groups, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes kept their personal lives almost hidden. The details of their marriages, relationships, and personal lives only surface years after their golden era. The band leader and group's namesake, Harold Melvin, we know that he was married to a woman named Olivette Melvin, but Melvin relentlessly built his focus on the group's success, and his schedules were cruel to the family he had. Then came the rumors of infidelity. Like every successful R&B group, the Blue Notes were mostly seen with women they refused to claim. The touring lifestyle always came with a host of women picked and dropped at random, yet that part of them remains scarce and seldom talked about. Known as a black soul group, the Blue Notes also had white musicians, especially as Philadelphia International Records was known for its racial integration in the studio. Zach Zachary was a talented saxophonist on some of their biggest records. He helped build the orchestral sound that defined Philly soul. Though not fully recognized as an official group member, Zachary's saxophone solos remain a key part of their music, although giving credits had always been a flaw of the Blue Notes, especially as it was the main cause of the rift within the group. Melvin refused to market the group as a mixed-race group, even though they were significant contributions of diversity in their music. Harold Melvin and Teddy Pendergrass may have been recognized as the key members of the Blue Notes, but they were not the only ones who played a crucial role in shaping the group's legacy. The group had other members, such as Bernard Wilson, Lawrence Brown, and several other contributors, who helped define their signature sound. But unfortunately, as the group's success faded, many of their members experienced life-changing personal struggles, health problems, and also financial difficulties that led to their tragic ends. One of these key moments was Bernard Wilson's passing. Bernard's background harmonies as one of the group's core vocalists added depth to their sound, and his passing rocked the entire group. Like many group members, Wilson had struggled with financial stability after their commercial. Success declined. The music industry constantly evolved, and older soul groups like the Blue Notes found it harder to remain relevant and keep up with the new sounds. Although Wilson had tried to continue performing, he could never regain the fame he had enjoyed during the 1970s. Harold Melvin also attempted to keep the group going and even recruited new singers to replace those who had left. However, none of the new recruits had the same magic as the group's original members. Still, they continued performing at smaller venues and oldies festivals, most of the time, but they were no longer topping the charts and selling out stadiums. But things took a worse return when Wilson's health started declining. Wilson was struck with diabetes and other medical complications, which in turn impacted the quality of his life. Without the same level of financial security as other artists from his era, managing his health became increasingly difficult. However, on December 26, 2010, Bernard lost the fight against diabetes and passed away at the age of 64. His death marked another loss for the group as yet another of its key members was gone. The decline of the group's influence. After years in soul music, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were no longer the group they had been in the 1970s. This was attributed mainly to the departure of the group's key members and the rise of new musical trends and talents. Since the group could not keep up with the new modern-age sound, they gradually faded. Harold and the Blue Notes contributed largely to shaping the Philadelphia soul sound. Also, they influenced generations of new artists. However, despite their contributions, their story is a remarkable success and heartbreaking tragedy. Although their individual lives were often marked by misfortune, their contributions to music remain undeniable. Songs like If You Don't Know Me By Now, The Love I Lost, and Wake Up Everybody continue to be played, covered, and sampled by modern artists. Though many original members have passed on, their voices live on through the music they left behind. They were pioneers of the Philadelphia soul movement and created music that touched the hearts of millions, which is still celebrated even decades after their prime. But despite their lasting impact on music, the personal stories of their members were filled with struggles, conflict, and tragedy. The group's visionary leader, Harold Melvin, spent his later years trying to keep the group alive, but tragically, a stroke ended his career and, ultimately, his life. Another important and most famous member of the group, Teddy Pendergrass, reached incredible heights as a solo artist before a car accident left him paralyzed. He had to retire from the group and face his battles, but he died in 2010. Shortly after his death, the other key members of the group also faced financial difficulties and health struggles. They also passed away without the true recognition they deserved for their contributions to the group. Their story reflects the harsh reality of the music industry, showing that great talent does not always guarantee financial security or a comfortable life. This is seen not just in the lives of the Blue Notes, but in many other big names in the industry, particularly from the R&B and soul genres. Despite contributing so much to music history, the Blue Notes have faced similar fates and struggled in their later years. The group faced issues such as poor financial management, lack of royalties for their songs, and exploitation from the industry. All these made them struggle after their spotlight had faded. Yet despite all these, their influence is still heard in modern R&B and soul music, ensuring their legacy remains intact. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes may no longer be together, but their voices will never be forgotten. Their music continues to resonate, reminding us of their brilliance, the cost of fame, and the need to support the artists who give so much to the world. While their lives were marked by hardship and fallouts, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes music remains timeless. Do you think the group received the recognition they truly deserved? Did Teddy Pendergrass make the right decision by leaving the group? How do you think their internal conflicts affected their long-term success? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our page. Before you go, click on the next video on the screen.